All right, is this where we introduce ourselves?
It's probably a good idea since we didn't do a pretty good job of it in the last episode.
No, look, I think we can just go back to the 30-minute mark of episode 1 and they'll hear all about us.
Yeah, I guess that's a learning process as well for us. Maybe we can just chop out the first 30 minutes of any of our episodes.
Yeah, for sure. We've received an email this week too, which I'd like to read out, and this is probably something that made us both smile to hear from one of our listeners. So, hey, Kieran and Jason, I just finished listening to episode 1 of Project RAWcast and thought it was fantastic. I found it really easy to listen to, even though I had it on in the background while I was concentrating and editing. I was hanging on to every part of the conversation and really enjoyed the content. I found myself nodding along to some of the points you discussed, and you both sounded so natural and down to earth. I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for the next episode. Cheers, Megan Mackey.
Yes, that was very good feedback to hear.
It's good to hear that we're easy to listen to, because I thought I sounded like I had 2 frogs stuck up my nose. A bit nasal and a little bit of work to do with my voice.
And I think I sounded like a bag of potatoes being dragged through the mud.
Yeah, that's right. We also had some other feedback through the week. One of our friends, Kate, who said that your voice was smooth and made for radio. Now, I think she missed the part where your face is also made for radio as well.
Yeah, it's definitely better to keep the face out of the public eye there.
Look, it's been a pretty good learning experience for us both over the past week. I mean, we're both photographers, not radio announcers or audio engineers or sound engineers. So it's been a bit of a learning experience to kind of figure all of this out as we're going along.
Yeah, we're both going to have to learn how to Photoshop our voices.
I found out that there is actually a sound heal tool in Adobe Audition, which is basically spot healing for our voices. So
that'd come in very handy and would get a lot of use, I think.
I've already been using it quite a bit during the week just to practice. So yeah.
And that's definitely one thing that everyone always has trouble with, listening to their own voice in a recording. And it doesn't matter how many times you do it, I think it's still just this odd sensation of listening to yourself talk and your processes and how you're thinking, and you sometimes think, I wish I hadn't have said that, or God, I sound so just stupid. But you just have to, I guess, get over it and realize that everyone thinks that about their own voice and move on past it.
Well, I just spent a couple of days reading articles from Petapixel and Wired.com and recording myself as I was reading them, just to try and get a bit of practice and actually listening to myself, because I've never really needed to record anything. Everything I do is text-based or image-based, so it's definitely been a good experience.
And yes, I know you sent me one of those recordings, and it helped drift me off into sleep. It was a very lovely, soothing voice.
That's it, yeah, and all the graphic equalization that I used to do so would have definitely helped. So yeah. Look, we've had a few questions come in, as we've already mentioned, across our social accounts, which is really cool, because something we really want to do is try to give a bit of an insight into the things that we experience in photography and the way that we do things ourselves. So the feedback and the questions coming in is pretty cool. So I'm going to kick off with question 1. Now, this one's definitely meant for you. I would have no idea about this. This has come from Nick Bajaj on your Facebook page. Mm-hmm. And the question is, how would you use a flash to do epic landscape portraits? Any tips?
Well, when I first read this, I did have a few ideas, and the first one that came to mind, and probably the simplest one, is don't. I tend not to use flash in any of mine or any of the landscape portraits that I do. I love natural light, and adding any kind of artificial light to beautiful landscapes can be a bit odd and make the image look a bit too artificial. But saying that, if you did want to use a flash, the other best way to use it is just as a fill-in flash. So you're not really adding too much more light to the whole scene, but you're just using the flash to fill in any areas of shadow that are a bit too dark and potentially too contrasty.
Okay, well, that's good. Look, I think people in landscapes are pollution, so I would probably crop the person out and not use a flash to start with. So yeah, look, that's yeah.
There is one other way if you wanted to get a bit more creative, and that's using the flash with a slower shutter speed and using a slow sync on the rear curtain. So in this way, you can add a bit of movement. So looking at a shutter speed around about half a second to a second and having the subject move a little bit. And then when the flash fires, it will freeze that image there, but you'll still have a bit of motion from the long exposure. And this can be a lot of fun to play around with, but it's just a matter of trial and error when it comes to that as well.
Yeah, cool. Look, I've actually seen a few good examples recently of people attaching flashes to drones and taking shots, which is pretty cool. Let's not talk about drones again too much this episode, but there's some really creative ways out there to actually use a flash and to use it in a landscape. Again, as I say, it's not my forte, so thankfully you could answer that one.
Yeah, and speaking of not being people's forte, I think the next question is definitely going to be aimed at you, since I know nothing about 360 photos. But the next question is a Instagram one from Regor 2013, and he says, enjoyed episode 1 and taking your drone advice. Wondering what advice you may have on 360 photos. Been playing with Google Street View app and thinking about a 360 camera.
Yeah, cool. Well, look, 360 photos are obviously becoming a lot bigger now. Facebook now handles native 360 content, which you can actually shoot with a mobile device if you really wanted to. It's not going to give you the best result, and it's not, for me, it's not a true 360. A true 360 means that you're shooting a full 360 degree range plus 180 degrees top and bottom as well. So you can actually, what we would call a spherical 360 panorama. Now, there's a few cameras on the market now that can do this. So the Ricoh Theta S, the Samsung Gear 360, and any of the Kodak Pix Pro series of cameras. Now, these range anywhere from $500 to $800 retail. They're okay and they're good. They're great for the average consumer. Very portable. You can pack them up and take them anywhere. They're literally little handheld cameras. There's some on the market like the 360 Fly, which I have used, and it's not a true 360 camera to start with. I wouldn't recommend this. Now, if you have a SLR, this is how I've done this myself. I've actually created a few 360s for myself and my clients as well. Using an SLR camera with either a wide angle or a fisheye lens, and a tripod. Now, preferably on the tripod if you can, using a panoramic head, which is going to allow you to also pan up and down to get the tops and bottoms of a 360 image. Now, you really want the tripod, if possible, to basically avoid what's known as parallax errors or having the images that you need to stitch together afterwards line up correctly. Now, the software that I use to do it is PT GUI. PT GUI is available for, I think it's about $149 online. You basically, in the process of shooting, would literally rotate your tripod head around a certain amount of degrees. Now, depending on how wide your lens is, depends on how far. Now, if you're using a fisheye, you take less images to start with. If you're using a 16mm lens, you'll probably take slightly more. Basically, you're rotating your panoramic head or your tripod head around by 30 to 60 degrees at a time, stitching 10 to 12 to 13 to 14, depending on how many you need to take based on what you're using, and using PT GUI to make everything line up, and exporting a particular spherical type of panorama. Now, they're then compatible with Facebook and so forth to be able to use. That's my way of doing it. If you've got the gear to do it already, you don't need to buy any third-party gear. You just need the software to do so.
Excellent. That's some pretty good advice there, or fairly in-depth.
Yeah, for sure. The Ricoh Theta S, if you are going to go and get an actual camera to do so, the Ricoh Theta S is probably one of the better ones on the market at the moment. If you go the Kodak Pix Pro, you really need two to do a true full 360. You can actually stick them back to back, and then the software will stitch those images together for you. Otherwise, as I say, using a DSLR camera these days, you can do it. And if you've got any basic photography knowledge, it doesn't take much to learn how to use PTGUI.
So I guess that'd take a lot of planning to work out what you're actually going to shoot at the time, wouldn't it?
Well, absolutely. And taking say 20 images to stitch together, one of the things you will have to remember is things like white balance, exposure, all those types of things, because if you're shooting a slightly darker image on one side to the other, you really need to get all those sort of things lined up. I tend to import everything into Lightroom when I do so, do my camera corrections to make sure that the distortion, those sort of things are removed, making sure that my exposure, compensation across all images, making sure the white balance is correct across all images before exporting them all into PTGUI. You end up with a better result in the end.
Cool. Sounds good.
Okay, so question 3 is from Stephen Brownhill. How much do you put into planning a location, and how much do we spend walking around when we are actually at that location as compared to shooting just the one composition?
Yeah, another good question, and probably something people wonder when they're actually walking around, whether they stick to the first composition that they find if they think it's good, or whether they spend the time and wander around looking for different potential ones. I guess my answer for that would be it depends on the location that I'm shooting at, whether I'm familiar with it, and if I do have a preconceived idea in mind. If I'm just heading out into Melbourne, I tend to try and find different locations, different compositions. So I'm always moving around and looking for something a bit different, something I haven't seen before. Whereas sometimes before I head out, I might have a specific composition or idea for a shot in mind, and I'll go there, I'll set up the tripod and potentially not move for the next 2 hours. For some photos that is necessary, especially if you're blending different exposures throughout different times.
Sure, look, I'm guilty of that as well. I tend to kind of focus on the composition that I already have in my head rather than moving around as much as I should. Part of this also comes from the use of filters, which I do quite a lot. The light that I shoot in is sunrise, sunset quite often, which means you've only got a limited time space to really get the images that you want. If I've visited a location more than once, or if I've visited that location many times, you kind of get to know your location a little bit more, and you probably do a bit more exploring. But if I'm on the road, I'm doing quick little shoots, or if I'm on a campaign, quite often it's quite limited time. So I don't move around as much as I should. That's a fault of my own. I would probably come away with a lot more images if I did so. But again, it also comes down to your preconceived idea of a location, as you say. If you've already seen some images from a location and you've got minimal time at that specific spot, you'll probably just naturally gravitate towards those compositions you've already seen. But location knowledge goes a long way in that as well. And obviously the more you get to visit, or the more often you visit a location, the more you're likely to actually learn and figure out your own compositions and try to experiment and move around a bit more.
Yeah, so if you've got the time before you head to a location, then get there a bit early, have a little look around, grab your camera out, just grab some handheld shots just to check out the composition, even see what it's going to look like. And that way, if you do lock yourself into a spot and it's not working out for you, you'll know different areas that you can quickly move to, and without worrying about whether it's going to work at a different spot. So if you've got the time, just wander around first.
Definitely, it's something, as I say, for me, quite often it takes 2 to 3 to 4 minutes for me to take some of the exposures that I take, which really does limit my time that I would have to actually move around. That's my own fault. I really should be a bit more mobile when I'm visiting scenes, and it's also just realistically it suits my particular photographic style as well, and the equipment that I use and the type of images that I take. I would like to move around more, and I probably definitely should.
Well, I suppose once you start getting a bit of colour in the sky in a sunset or sunrise, it could potentially only last a couple of minutes or 5 minutes. And if you're spending all that time moving around looking for something new, you're going to miss your opportunity. So doing that preparation beforehand is, if you've got the opportunity, is best. Otherwise, stick to what you've got with when the conditions are right.
Absolutely. All right. Well, hopefully we've answered that one for Stephen. So question 4, you can go for this one, mate.
Question 4 is from Matty John. And he says, for someone just learning how to use a Canon digital SLR in full frame, there are so many lenses out there. Where's a good starting point for a landscape, wide angle, and telephoto lens, I think he means? Or is there one that covers both well, a good all-rounder?
Cool. Well, luckily we both use Canon, so this is a question that I think we'll find quite easy to answer ourselves from the use of our own equipment.
Yep.
So firstly, landscape lenses. I don't know what I would do without my 16 to 35mm lens. I personally use the f2.8 lens, and I do so because I travel a lot. I don't want to carry so many lenses around. It's a fantastic lens for astro. But the f4 version of the 16 to 35mm Canon is an incredible lens, very sharp. A lot of reviews actually say it's a better quality lens than the f2.8 version 2, which I have. There is a version 3 out now.
And I use the f4, and I'm very happy with it, and it's probably what's on the body of my 5D most of the time, probably 90% of the time. And I'll only switch to my 24 to 105 if I do need that more telephoto view.
Well, that's, as a general purpose lens, the 24 to 105mm f4 is one of the better lenses on the market for sure. If there's actually been some reports come out this week, which you'll find on Petapixel, we'll probably link to it, that actually states it is the most widely used lens in the world based on the specific research that this one particular article is on. Matched and paired with any Canon body, the 24 to 105 is the most commonly used lens. The actual range from 24 to 105mm is great for the average shooter. It's a fantastic travel lens as well. You don't have to take too many. There are obviously great uses for anything up to a 2 to 3 to 400mm zoom lenses, but if you are limited in what you wanted to spend, and if it was a choice of one or the other, the 24 to 105mm f4 Canon is a fantastic lens.
Yes, definitely, especially if you're traveling and you only want to have one lens and you don't want to be changing lenses, the 24 to 105 is all you'll ever need.
Yeah, for sure. Landscape lenses, though, in terms of wide angle, anything with the 16 to 35mm, either of the versions of those lenses for Canon is a fantastic lens. It's my most used lens for sure. I probably spend more time using the 16 to 35mm than I've used any other lens in my bag. The 24 to 70 is a lens that I use as well, 24 to 70 f2.8. But realistically, the 16 to 35mm is my go-to lens for the types of images that I shoot. If you're shooting portraits, those sort of things, f2.8 can be an advantage. So f2.8 is a much faster lens than the f4. But it's, again, the f2.8 version of any lens, you're going to spend another $1,000 on top of any of the f4s. So that's something to budget for as well. One thing to remember here too with lenses is lenses should last multiple generations of camera bodies. So consider your lenses a serious investment. If you buy a bad lens, I think there's a saying which is buy cheap, buy twice. Obviously, match to your budget is hugely important, but a better quality lens, and particularly the L series Canon lenses, are going to last you for many years to come, outlast your camera bodies, going to provide the sharpest images and the best quality images that you'll be able to produce. So.
Cool. Well, I think we've covered our listener questions there.
I think so too. Yeah, look. So something really exciting for us. Obviously, we're only into episode 2 of Project RAWcast. We hope to have many hundreds of more episodes and
hundreds.
Yeah, look, we have an episode sponsor for this episode, which is really, really cool. So Nisi Australia have come on board, offering us a fantastic prize to our listeners, which
to one listener.
To our listener, to our winning listener. Now, the Nisi offer filters. Nisi, as far as I am personally concerned, produce the best filters that I have ever used. I have used every single brand that you can think of on the market over the years. Nisi currently are my absolute favourite. So they've come on board with a really cool prize, which is the V5 filter holder kit, which is it includes the polarizer, which is something that none of the other filter brands on the market do. It also includes all of your adapter rings from 67, 72mm, 77mm and 82mm, which basically covers every lens size that you can possibly ever require. It also includes the filter holder itself, which holds 3 filters plus the polarizer. Now, this is valued at $229 Australian. So, how do you think we should give this away? What do you think?
Well, this will only be open to our Australian listeners as well, and I think probably the best way we could give this out to our listeners is to run a little Instagram competition with a hashtag of Project RAWcast.
Cool. Do you think? I think maybe we should include this on Facebook as well, not just Instagram. So just the hashtag Project RAWcast.
Yeah, we can do that as well.
Okay. All right. So what are we going to do here? I think we're going to pick one winning image from the Project RAWcast hashtag. Now, we're not looking for anything in particular. I think it's just an image that makes us both smile. We're not looking for the most or the best image or the most engagement out of an image. We're looking for an image that really makes us smile and makes us think about what that image is. So do you have any criteria that you think we should add to this?
I think as long as they use the hashtag Project RAWcast as well as follow us on Instagram and Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. So let's go with the best landscape image that makes us smile. Now, it doesn't have to be anything. It can be a picture of anything. Just add the Project RAWcast hashtag. So hashtag Project RAWcast to anything on Instagram and Facebook. Follow us on either of those social channels, and we'll absolutely consider that image for this prize. Now, the winning prize will be drawn on the 16th of October, and we'll announce this across our social channels as well and identify and notify the winner. We'll also identify and notify the winner within episode 3 of Project RAWcast as well. So
yes, definitely.
Cool. All right. So check out our social channels, and we'll have a little bit more details about that on both of those. And massive thank you to Nisi Filters for supporting us on that. Check them out on nisifilters.com.au or on Instagram at Nisi Filters Australia. They're a fantastic company to deal with, and they're doing big things in the Australian photography community as well. So,
yes, thank you very much, Nisi.
Cool. Sweet. So I think that's the formalities out of the way there. We've got
run through everything that we needed to cover in this episode. We may as well get on to the actual episode itself.
That's it.
That's quite an introduction.
Absolutely. Look, a huge thank you to all the people that have actually sent in the feedback and engaged with us across social. We really hope to make this something that is worthwhile for the photography community in Australia and beyond. So keep those questions and keep that feedback rolling in. Make sure you follow us on all of our social channels, and we'll do our best to ensure that we are noticing you when you are chatting with us as well. So cool. So, all right. So a couple of topics here that the general photography community as a whole would definitely recognise. Something I get asked quite a lot, and I'm pretty sure you get asked quite a lot as well, is Lightroom versus Photoshop. Yes,
this is a big question, and it seems kind of odd that it's pretty much this, not quite the same program, but the same supplier of a program, and to have competition within that seems a bit strange, but people generally use either one or the other, or some people use a combination of both, but it's definitely a question that people raise, which one's better and which one should they use. I personally use Photoshop, and I think that's all I ever need to use because Photoshop is limitless. You can use it as much as you want or for as little as you want. And if it's combined with Camera Raw, which is like a staging area for Photoshop, then you're pretty much getting the benefits of Lightroom as well.
I think this is a funny one too. Like we hear it quite a lot that Lightroom versus Photoshop. I personally don't think this is the case, that they need to be competing against each other. I'm a firm believer that it depends on where you're up to within your photography knowledge to which one would probably suit you better. Remembering, so Lightroom and Photoshop can both process raw images in the same way. So what is it that would make you personally choose Photoshop over Lightroom?
Well, I use Photoshop mainly because you can control how delicate you are with your image and how refined you can make your selections of certain areas of your photo. Combined with Camera Raw, it makes it so you can have those little fine adjustments using sliders, and then you can use Photoshop to make very select adjustments to very certain areas, and you can control it really quite surgically.
Okay, so by that, what I'm assuming you're meaning there is with Photoshop, you have much better control over local adjustments as compared to Lightroom, which has much better control over global adjustments of the entire image.
Well, I'd say that Lightroom has much easier control over global adjustments, but not necessarily better control. You can still do those global adjustments in Photoshop if you chose to, but Photoshop is more of an all-in-one, and once you actually start it and really get through and try and know it, you'll find that Lightroom may seem a little bit too basic, but still I wouldn't rule Lightroom out as a fantastic program to use, especially for speed of editing or refining images.
For sure. And something with Lightroom, so I believe Lightroom is effectively a fancy Camera Raw tool, if you like. Basically anything you can do within Camera Raw, you can do within Lightroom. It is basically that. But Lightroom also includes the cataloging options of being able to tag and keyword, really sort your images and catalog them over time. Now, if I was a beginner photographer, in my personal opinion, I think there's bigger things to worry about and learn than things like luminosity masking or too much complexity within layer masks or the editing features that Photoshop really offers. I think Lightroom is probably going to teach you everything that you really need to focus on to begin with until you understand how to use your camera. I think once your skill evolves within photography and you really want to start doing much more accurate and more refined editing, Photoshop is definitely the better the tool out of the two. So I tend to recommend and advise Lightroom to people who are just starting out in photography and who still really need to learn the basics of how to use their camera in the first place. And then as you outgrow Lightroom, obviously Photoshop's going to provide such a great toolkit to really do anything you want with your images. So.
Yeah, and I definitely agree, because if you're just starting out with either of them, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make a lot of mistakes, and you're going to have to try and work out what changes look like, how colors change when you're moving sliders, using curves in Photoshop. And I think if you're going to make the mistakes, you're going to make them quicker and learn quicker if you just stick with Lightroom to start with. Because I see Lightroom also as being a combination of Adobe Bridge, Camera Raw, and Photoshop. And it's just taking the necessary bits from each of those three to make the one program of Lightroom. And if you can just breeze through in Lightroom, and as Jason says, once you sort of outgrow Lightroom, moving on to Photoshop will be a better option then.
And back, we're talking a few years ago, you really needed to buy Photoshop outright if you were to use it. And I think the $600 to $700 to $800 price tag would have really been a factor to consider within photography. Photoshop now offer their Creative Suite, Photoshop CC, Lightroom CC, which is available by a subscription service. So for $12 Australian, you can actually subscribe and get both tools. So $12 per month Australian, you get access to both tools, both Lightroom and Photoshop, which as you advance and Bridge.
And
so
Bridge
as you advance through your photography knowledge and kind of gain more, you'll actually find both of them are highly complementary to each other. I use both. I use both all the time. I'm shifting files between Lightroom and Photoshop. I do my basic adjustments or what I would think were my camera raw adjustments within Lightroom, do my cropping within Lightroom, do my keyword tagging, cataloging, those sort of things within Lightroom, and then I will shift my files, which is incredibly easy to do, into Photoshop, open my files in Photoshop, and if there's any major adjustments in terms of masking, luminosity masking, saturation adjustments, all of those more advanced adjustments, I will definitely do them in Photoshop and then shift the file back into Lightroom for cataloging and storage. For $12 Australian, I don't think you can go wrong by having both tools at your disposal and installed on your computer. You will either of them are worth the amount of money that Adobe is now asking for the two. This is a weird conversation that gets thrown around a lot, is Lightroom versus Photoshop, and I don't think really they should be competing products. They are complementary products, but they're products that are also much better suited depending on your knowledge of photography as well.
And also needs as well, because you can edit photos a lot faster through Lightroom since you're just using the one program. And if you're working, you do have a lot of photos that you need to get through. You can do things quickly with presets and just attach it to all the photos that you're working on from a particular shoot. Whereas Photoshop, I can spend well over an hour to 2 hours just on one image. And that's because I make my images so they can be printed out quite large. They're not just for sharing on social media or online or...
Well, that's... Yeah, for sure. I think presets are a huge thing as well in terms of workflow, depending on what type of photography you do. I know many event and, say, wedding photographers who actually use presets. Now, many those types of photographers are actually employed quite often based on the style of imagery they produce. And presets can really help speed up the workflow of processing 200 to 300 to 400 images in a day, being able to literally, the press of one button, apply your particular style to the images that you're editing and then sync those across your entire set of content for the day. A lot of people will say presets are a lazy way of producing images. Unfortunately, I don't believe that in any way. I think presets are a smart way to speed up your workflow. Presets can be purchased online. If you like a particular style of image, you can actually literally go and buy presets, and all they are settings or a variation of, say, +10 contrast, +20 shadows at the click of a button. And it really does help your workflow as well, which, depending on your style of photography, again, may actually be really beneficial.
Well, I think we could probably move on to a much more universal challenge between two different types of things, and that's whether you use PC or whether you use Mac. Probably a broad question there, but I guess we'll try and keep it for photography and photography editing.
Mac, all the way. Have been for many years, and I will continue to for many years. I have no doubt about this whatsoever. I used PC a lot when I was younger. I used to build computers myself, particularly for gaming, those sort of things, customizing hardware. I caused myself endless headaches by doing so. That was just my personal opinion again. Not to bag out anybody out there who's using PC, but I like my computer to work when I turn it on, my computers to work when I turn it on. I don't want to worry about device drivers. I don't want to worry about anything else. I just want it to work and I want it to function. The less that I can think about my computer actually functioning the way I want it to, the better my productivity is. So remembering as well, I use my computer for everything in my life.
Spoken like a true Mac user there.
Yeah.
Are you going to bring up viruses next as well?
Look, I probably won't need to. I think everybody out there already knows that, and I'm not going to tell the whole world about this again. But look, it's not just Mac for me as well. Like the whole Apple ecosystem is a big thing for me across everything that I do. iPhones, Apple TVs, iPads, everything that I use in terms of computer technology is manufactured by Apple.
Yeah, you buy one and they've got you for life.
Yeah, look, but I'm happy for it too as well. And it's not just my opinion based on them looking better or looking shiny or any of those types of things. I'm a tech geek and I have been my entire life. I don't need to customize my hardware. I don't need to install faster graphics processors. I don't need to change my CPU. I don't need to install new hard drives or I don't need to do any of that stuff simply because Mac works for me and it functions in the exact way that I want. And things like the App Store for me are great. I buy an application once. I've got licenses for 5 computers. My office, I have multiple Macs. My home, I have multiple Macs. So everything for me is Mac. I know we both share an entirely different opinion on this one. So
I wouldn't necessarily say it's an entirely different opinion. I agree with anyone using anything that works and that suits them. For me, I've just grown up using PC, so I use a PC. I don't have any particular loyalties to any computing brands. I just get whatever works. My computer was custom made, but it's been running fine for many years now. I don't know, I'll probably upgrade it eventually, but at the moment it works, and as long as it's working, then I'll continue to use it. I don't think that I would ever switch over to Mac, and that's probably just comes down to the fact that I am used to what I'm using, and switching over would really, I'd have to spend a lot of time getting used to a whole new system, and at this stage it's just not worth it.
Look, I should have actually recorded the half an hour prior to us starting to record this.
I'm kind of glad you didn't know.
Because a perfect example of this was quite simply that I have no issues whatsoever recording a Skype conversation. You're currently in Melbourne, I'm currently in Hobart, and feeding both channels through Adobe Audition quite easily. We had a bit of an issue with you recording both sides of this conversation on your computer. And
to be fair, last episode I had none of those problems, but I suppose now that it has cropped up, that is even more of a damnation of PC. But I will eventually sort out this problem and go back to recording nice and smoothly. But that is kind of funny.
But no, this is a perfect example for me. I just know when I turn my Mac on that it's going to work exactly how I want it to, whenever I want. I'm sure there's plenty of reasons. It's probably the same with iOS versus Android. So Apple mobile phones versus any phone running the Google operating system. The true hardcore hardware aficionados out there amongst the public will probably look at me and laugh. But how often do you really need the extra customizable functions that Android offers on your device, which quite simply do one thing, which is increases and opens the operating system to many more security issues than Apple have? Yes, Apple across Mac and their mobile devices have very much a closed ecosystem, and I appreciate that completely. I do know that we're probably going to receive a few emails and little messages across our social platforms about this, but I don't mind having that or giving up that control of the operating system, as long as I know when I turn it on, it's going to do exactly what I want it to do when I want it to do it. And I've never found anything that the iPhone or the Mac or my iPad or even my Apple TV don't do that I would need to do on a day-to-day basis. So
fair enough. But I'm still not switching. I like these little problems that crop up. It makes me a harder person having to get through them and deal with them.
Yeah, look, I'm actually surprised. Like I watch on Instagram stories and see some of the guys that I follow, posting shots of them editing on a Windows PC. I've had a couple of Australia's leading landscape photographers come and stay in my house down here with me, and we've done trips around Tassie, who are all using Windows PCs, and particularly now with some of the new hardware where you've got touchscreen adjustments on them, and they all look fantastic and they all look great.
And yeah, so if you want to see Tassiegrammer's setup, if you head over to our Facebook page, you'll be able to see his setup, which is cutting out one of his apples. He could only fit two in the photo there.
Yeah, it's actually cutting out the other one that's sitting on the floor that I've actually taken off my desk at the moment as well. Look, I've been using Apple since probably when I got my first iPhone. I think I got my first iPhone in 2009. Now, when I also first started my online marketing company, there was a specific piece of software that I wanted, which was only available on Mac. But the Mac also gave me the advantage, if I really wanted to run parallels on it, to run Windows. I, even within my client base, have shifted many clients away from Windows through to Macs, particularly if I've got anything to do with helping them to maintain their computer network and so forth. There's just so much stuff on Windows that I personally believe are just security issues and features that you just don't need to deal with on a day-to-day basis. For photography editing in particular, hardware-wise, I use the 5K iMac desktop, maxed out everything. It's got every additional hardware upgrade you could possibly think of, and it works. It flies. It's beautiful. Great video editing suite. Everything's fantastic on it. So.
All right, shall we move on to Canon versus Nikon? Or no, I won't get into that. That's probably a whole episode in itself.
No, let's not get into that one. I think we'll definitely be copying some abuse across our social channels if we get into that one.
Especially both being Canon users, it's just going to be like very one-sided probably.
Well, that's it. Yeah, look, something as well I wanted to probably touch on here over the past week. We've been working really on distribution of this podcast. We've trying to make sure that we're available everywhere for people to find us. Obviously, through our website, it's going to be where we market through our social channels. We launched without being available on iTunes, which unfortunately was just led to a delay from Apple actually approving this show, but happy to say we're now available on iTunes. Yay. Also available on SoundCloud, through the Pocket Casts app, Stitcher, Overcast.
Are we available on Windows? I don't know.
If we are, I'm glad. Look, if it works, then that's awesome. Look, Overcast FM and Player FM as well. We're going to work on ensuring that we're available pretty much anywhere that a podcast is available. And
would it be easier to list where we're not available?
Possibly. But for now, look, most major podcast platforms we're available on. You'll be able to find us, and you'll obviously be able to find each new episode available on our website when they're available as well, which
makes us available to anyone as long as they go to projectrawcast.com.
Listen, look, we're obviously aiming at the moment to have episodes available once every 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, I think once I just sort of go through maybe a few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks of trying to get a podcast out every week, we'll bring it back to once a fortnight, I think.
For sure. Look, and this is something that we really want to drive as well, is ensuring that our listeners do engage with us and ask us plenty of questions. So please remember that if you have any questions that you would like us to answer, to head on over to any of our social channels or email us at hello@projectrawcast.com. We will definitely be be ensuring that we're doing our best to answer as many questions as possible each week.
Yes, we want to hear from you.
Yeah. Now, look, and again, you and I talk quite a lot. We obviously speak quite a lot. It was your birthday during the week, and I'm sure it was the best birthday you've ever had because you pretty much spent the entire day
chatting to you most of the day,
chatting with me, which is pretty awesome. How was your trip to Brisbane outside of that?
It was okay. If it was a holiday, it would have been fantastic. The weather was perfect, not a cloud in the sky, warm. It was a good chance to head out into Brisbane and just get to know the city a bit more. But
so not a cloud in the sky, so basically no good for photography.
There was I went out one night when it was clear skies and I had a shot in mind, so I went out and tried to capture that one. But the next night, which I think actually was on my birthday, I head out and Brisbane delivered and gave me some nice colourful clouds. So that was nice of Brisbane to put on a show for my birthday.
Did you move around when you were visiting each location?
The first night I stayed put and got in everyone's way on a bridge. People stuck on their phones and then they almost walked into me before they sort of shook awake and realised that they were about to run into an obstacle. The second night I went back to that same location, but looking the other way on the bridge and just realised that the same problem that I was going to have the previous night, which was the bridge was just really shaky. And I ended up moving to another spot that I'd checked out during the day, and I was happy with my location there. Okay. Did you get any of the locals, as you did so here in Tasmania, trying to pick fights with you because you got in their way? No. I think everyone else was just too busy getting to where they were going. I didn't really see too many photographers out in Brisbane. I would have thought in some of the spots I went to that I would have seen a few more. I saw a couple of people holding tripods, but not many people out taking shots. Because there's no clouds, mate. Yeah. Everybody knows not to take shots when there's no clouds. Look, Brisbane's pretty cool for when the storms happen up there, though. So shame that you didn't get a storm while you're up there, because it's one thing that I'm missing out of my portfolio with some cracking lightning shots, which we just don't get down here in Tasmania. Brisbane's much better weather. Every time I plan to go away somewhere that actually has thunderstorms, for example, Northern Territory for 4 weeks earlier this year, it just happens to never actually be a thunderstorm, even when they're meant to happen. That's the weather for you. Yeah, absolutely. Now, look, so what do you pack when you go away? This is something I'm really interested in. So we both spend quite a lot of time on the road. We, Jetstar and Virgin like to now charge us extra baggage every time we step on a plane with with too much gear. Airplanes are getting a bit better with what they allow you to take on as carry-on. They're a bit more lenient when it comes to your baggage allowance, and I was surprised when I was heading out and they were saying you can take the one carry-on bag as well as another smaller bag or smaller item, which would be a laptop or something like that. But in terms of camera gear, what I pack is, I guess I try and pack everything that I can, or everything that'll fit into my carry-on luggage. But my tripod tends to be a bit too big, and I'll pack that into a check-in bag, which can be a bit annoying. I guess I haven't really tried taking the tripod on a plane or in the actual cabin. Okay, is there anything you consider? I mean, obviously when you're packing your bag, you're quite limited in the amount of lenses and things you could carry. I wish I could carry every single lens and every single camera body that I owned everywhere I go. And your drone and my drone. That'd be awesome. A couple of tripods, etc. But when you're traveling, do you feel limited in the camera gear that you carry generally? Is there something, what sort of consideration do you put into the lenses that you're taking? What sort of consideration to put into the camera body you're taking? Those sort of things. I will generally focus on probably the lenses that we spoke about earlier in the episode in terms of just having a general range. Absolutely, my 16mm lens and probably just a single general purpose lens, either a 24-70 or a 24-105.
it'd be fantastic to be able to take more. What lenses are you carrying in your bag?
Well, I always have a range of lenses. So I've got my 16 to 35. I've got my 24 to 105. I've got a 70 to 300, which doesn't get too much use, but at least it's there if I need it. And I've also got a 50mm prime at 1.4, I think. And it's just a broad range of different focal lengths, and it covers me for any situation that would come up. I've just got the one body, the 5D Mark III, and I've got all my filters as well, and remotes, extra batteries, extra...
How many remotes?
I have 2 remotes at the moment.
How many times now have we've been out somewhere together, actually, and our remotes have failed us? It's
Yeah, although most of the time I tend to say, I've got a spare remote at home, but it doesn't do me much good at home.
For sure. Look, I'm lucky enough, I think, to have a few camera bodies, and I've been recently trying to limit dust and things by actually carrying 2 cameras that are fitted, the 2 lenses that I would generally use, one on each camera. I don't know how many times now I've been out somewhere and literally, particularly places that I shoot in waterfalls, I've had my remotes drop in the water. And this is actually an ongoing issue for me. I don't know how it happens. It keeps happening.
I've never dropped a remote in the water, but I know people who have, and you are one of them.
So now, look, I've got in my bag, I now carry 3 different methods of triggering my camera remotely. The Cam Ranger as well, which is fantastic if you want to take some selfies. Jump in front of the camera, trigger your camera wirelessly. I don't take many selfies, as I said earlier. I think people in photos are pollution, and I would actually clone myself out. But being out in some of the places that we go, and particularly when I'm traveling, it can be limiting with the amount of gear you take. So you've kind of got to be really smart in packing what you do, or just remembering that you may end up carrying 15 kilos on your back.
50 kilos.
50 kilos. 15 kilos on your back when you're going, simply because of all the possibilities. Now I've got a trip coming up where later this year, actually next month, I'm doing the overland track. So this is something I would love to know if anybody out there's actually listening, which would be great.
I'll listen, but I won't be able to give you much advice.
Look, the overland track's a 6-day walk from Cradle Mountain through to Lake St Clair National Park here in Tassie. I'm actually a bit scared because I've never really done those sort of long walks, and I'd love to know what sort of gear people carry, what they're taking, when they're carrying, what they're packing. Just
try and keep your shoes dry from day one. You have a terrible habit of just getting your shoes or getting yourself completely drenched when you first start a trip, so just try and keep dry.
I better take 4 pairs of shoes, about 23 pairs of socks then, because I can guarantee you if there's water there, it doesn't even matter if I attempt to, my shoes will get wet on day one. So on this particular trip, not only do we have to carry camera gear, we're also going to carry sleeping bags, tents, cooking equipment, food, everything that's going to be required across 6 days. If I carry my camera gear alone, it's probably going to be, as I say, 15 kilos on my back. So this thing of, what do we take when we go away? I'm actually a little bit nervous about this one, making sure that I've got everything that I need.
You might have to cut it down to just 1 camera body and maybe 2 lenses.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the other guys that are coming on the trip, I'm not going to mention their name, would like to carry some of my camera gear for me.
Just distribute it out over everyone. You can take this camera, you can take that lens, you can take that tripod, you can carry the drone.
Yeah,
I'm sure they'd be happy to help out.
This is going to be a good one too, because the 4 photographers that I know that are going on this particular trip, I'm the only Canon user in the 4, which is actually quite strange. Normally when I go somewhere, everybody's carrying Canon gear. We've got two Nikon, whatever you want to say, users, and an Olympus user as well. So I actually need to make sure that I'm taking all of the equipment that I need, but still be able to carry it around. So maybe a Sherpa
Yeah.
A donkey.
Yeah, take a Sherpa with you.
Take a donkey. Have you done any of these long trips, like multi-day walks or any of that sort of stuff?
No, I haven't done any multi-day hikes where I'd need to carry a lot of stuff, but I did do the Northern Circuit in New Zealand, which is quite a long and challenging walk, I suppose, and we had some pretty bad conditions at the time. But I was lucky that I kind of had a Sherpa in the sense that my wife was able to carry my camera gear.
At least you said she's a Sherpa and not a donkey.
Yeah. That's while one of us carried all the food and water that we might need, I carried all my camera gear as well. And I didn't end up using a lot of it, but just because the conditions were horrible, we had huge, very high winds and a lot of snow and a lot of cloud cover as well. But it was nice to be able to have someone else share the load as well. But I think for a multi-day hike, I'd just have to tell myself that I can't take everything and just deal with it. If I'm in a situation where I thought, I wish I had this on me, I'd just not worry about it and just get the best shot I could with the gear that I'd brought with me. Cool.
Well, I actually call my partner my assistant when we're out, not my Sherpa. I think it's a bit nicer. It's great when she comes with me because I'm quite often needing to pull gear in and out of my bags or sorting out filters or any of that sort of stuff, and she can kind of help carry. So maybe we should thank our partners for the help that they give us.
Constantly thanking my wife for helping me out. Yeah, whenever traveling around, or just sitting there patiently while I'm spending an hour or more in the one spot taking photos.
I just take a few pictures of my partner for her Instagram account as my way of thanking her. So yeah, I'd be interested in hearing if anybody out there's got any tips for what to carry on a 6-day trip, or how to limit my gear, or what not to take. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting trip. I'm going to have no mobile phone signal for 6 days. So sorry, clients, I'm not going to be available for 6 days. I'm already nervous about that. I'm not going to be able to check my Instagram account for 6 days.
Yeah, that's
probably going to be even worse.
If you want, just give me your Instagram password and I'll post a couple of photos on there for you. And
I would love that. I would love that. That'd be awesome. Yes.
Not of mine. I'd just find something.
I was going to say it'd be a step down in quality if you posted any of your images onto my Instagram. Look, we outside of all the channels that we're now available on, or our social channels, all of the distribution channels, iTunes, etc., we have also set up a Patreon page, which is a great way for any listeners out there, if you wanted to support us financially in this little endeavour and little project that we've got set up here. Go over and check it out. Now, I'm going to say I had nothing to do with the setup of the page. If this one here, look, if our first aim and first target is to get to $500 on the page, we've already got one donor, which is fantastic. But if we get to $500 and if you have a quick little look at the page, I will not be sending Kieran a thank you card. He thinks I'm going to.
No, you're going to buy me a microphone and I'm going to send you a thank you card.
You're going to send me a thank you card.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, terrific. So look, head on over there and check that out if you can. As we said, we're not...
if anyone's seen my post about my setup, I'm using a toaster to record all this, so I need a microphone.
That's how your voice is so warm and buttery.
Yes.
your toaster mic.
Yes, it jams up occasionally.
What else? I mean, what do you got to say?
I guess we can finish up with just thanking Nissi again, Nissi Australia, for supporting this episode and letting us give something back to our listeners after giving us such a warm review for our first episode.
Yes, absolutely. Look, and they're V5 holder system is the prize that we're giving away. Again, just check out our social channels over the next few days, and you'll see how you can win yourself one of those. So
yeah, and make sure to hashtag Project RAWcast.
For sure, absolutely. Look, I think that's about a wrap for now on this particular one. What do you think?
Yeah, all right. I guess we'll see everyone next time.
Terrific. All right. Thank you. See you guys. Bye.
Bye.